This video is sponsored by Mini FCU. The Mini FCU, developed by two real-world Airbus captains, aims to be an accurate 80% scale recreation of the real-world Airbus FCU, providing the user with an affordable and authentic autopilot control interface for your Airbus flight simulation add-ons. The Mini FCU project can currently be supported over on Kickstarter. Discounts are available to early backers of the project. As with any Kickstarter campaign, there are certain risks associated with your financial support, so please do familiarise yourself with both the process and the project thoroughly before making any financial contributions. I'll leave a link to the Mini FCU Kickstarter page down in the video description below. Hello again everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're heading out for another tear around in the Skunk Works TF-104 Starfighter. I realised the other day that it's actually been quite some time since we last flew a fast jet here on the channel, so I thought we ought to remedy that situation with a quick blast around the Swiss Alps. We find ourselves on the ground at AG Sim's Mollis Airbase. Our routing today will be familiar to many of you, I'm sure. We've flown the same profile in both the Just Flight Hawk and the Irish Simulations PC-21 previously. As you'll see, it is an absolutely cracking area in which to fly. I'll leave a list of the flight plan coordinates down in the video description below, should you wish to give the flight a go for yourselves. We're going to be carrying out a full flight, including the startup and the shutdown, departing from Mollis and returning to the airbase later on today. There was quite a bit of weather passing through the area this morning, but things seem to have cleaned up quite nicely now. Our ground crew have the Starfighter set and ready to go, so let's head for the cockpit and we'll fire up the mighty F-104.
Okay, so welcome once again to the cockpit of the Skunk Works TF-104. As we mentioned during the introduction, the weather's clearing up reasonably nicely for us, so it should make for a pretty decent run down through the mountains. Running through our before start checks, the left console circuit breakers are checked in. Emergency UHF radio is set off. UHF command radio will set to transmit. Stability control switches are set on and guarded. APC cutout switch is on and guarded. Refueling switch is set off. And the fuel cutoff switch is on, guarded, and the clip is in place. Auxiliary trim selector is set to stick trim. Radar control panel is off. Wing flap lever is up. Throttle is off, the speed brake switch is set in. Landing gear lever is down, the red light is out. Landing gear unsafe indication is out. And we have three greens displaying there on the landing gear indication. Anti-skid switch can go on, landing light and taxi light are off, drag chute handle is stowed, armament control panel is checked, manual landing gear release handle is stowed, altimeter is set, the clock is checked, airspeed index marker will set at 190 for our current takeoff weight for our flight this morning, and we have 190 set, PHI will set to INS. Standby attitude indicator is checked, primary attitude indicator is checked, they'll both come good once we have the INS aligned. Accelerometer has been reset, weapon select panel is checked and the drop block switch is set to safe. Canopy jettison handle is stowed, ram air turbine handle is stowed, and the emergency nozzle closure handle is stowed. Storm lights are off. External fuel quantity indications. As you'll have seen, we've just got the tip tank selected for the flight. And we're showing about 1,100 pounds in each of the tip tanks there. Generator switches are both on and guarded. Canopy defogger rheostat will leave off. We'll carry out a fuel quantity test. So both gauges rolling back to 0. And the needles returning to their previous position. Liquid oxygen quantity, we're looking for at least 4 litres, we've got 10 plus litres on board the aircraft. Oxygen system is checked, we can turn that on. And we've got normal oxygen supply and normal flow. Faceplate heat rheostat will leave off. Pressure suit valve lever can go on. TACAN control panel will leave off. IFF master switch can go to standby. SIF panel is checked, DCU 9 alpha panel is checked. Inertial navigation control will leave off for the time being. Dual timers are checked. And the fresh air scoop lever we've set fully aft into the closed position. Running through the last few of our checks, the cockpit temperature mode can go to auto. Cockpit heat rheostat will leave in the cold position for the time being. Pitot switch is off. Engine duct anti-ice switch is off. Ventilator seat blower is off. And the rain removal switch is set off. Lighting is set as required internally. Externally we'll go to steady on the nav lights and bright. And we'll get the beacon on in preparation for the start. PHI navigation control is checked, and the C2G compass panel is checked. Rocket select panel is set, and the align control panel is checked. So that just about completes our before start checks. Let's now get this thing fired up. Okay, so we do have a good start. The engine RPM there idling just below 70%. Oil pressure looks good, the jet pipe temperature looks good. We can start aligning the INS, we've already got that in standby. We'll set to align and just waiting on the mode light there to start flashing. Optical sight is off, rain removal will leave off. Radar, again we won't be needing that for the flight today, so we'll leave that off. UHF is set, TACAN is off. IFF can go to normal. And we do now have the mode light flashing, so we can set the INS to nav. The caution light is extinguished, the IRs are both aligned, and we're showing a heading of about 009 there on the PHI, and about the same there on the standby compass. Engine duct anti-ice not required for the time being, speed brakes will extend. And just checking with the ground crew there that we do have correct speed brake extension. So we'll track those once again. Pitot static heating can go on. Anti-skid switch is on. Flaps will set to land.
01, are you looking for more than 9K or you want just 9K?
And we do have the land indication, we'll go back to takeoff. And takeoff we have. We'll carry out an emergency nozzle closure system check. So we'll pull the lever. We're looking for between 1 and 3 units on the gauge, we're showing about 2.2 there. So we are checked. And stowing the lever once again back to the original position. Ejection seat pin has been removed. External safety pins not required. Close up the canopy. And the canopy handle is locked, the caution is out. We'll get our wave off from our ground crew. He's removed the chocks. And we are now ready for the taxi. So coming up on the throttle, we'll get rid of our mirrors, we're not going to need those for the flight today. And just checking we are all clear behind. So joining onto the main taxiway, that's pretty much straight ahead. Just checking the flight instruments here in the turn. And we'll just tap the brakes. So we'll get ourselves lined up on the runway. Looks to be all clear on final. We'll carry out the before takeoff checks once we're lined up.
Yeah, we said 19.3 or 21.3.
And again, all clear. The runway is pretty heavily contaminated, so it's a little bit tricky to make out the markings, but you can more or less see the touchdown zone there. And onto the brakes, we'll hold the aircraft momentarily. The before takeoff checks, external tanks, it does look like we're feeding from the tip tanks, we're down to about £1,000 on each side now. Wing flaps are in the takeoff position, speed brakes are in, canopy is closed and locked, oxygen is set and checked, IFF is set, TACAN is off, radio is checked, ejection seat pin has been removed, defogger is off, stabiliser trim all set, we're waiting for the green light there on the stabiliser, which we now have. Anti-collision light is on, and that's the before takeoff checklist complete, so we are now ready to go. So we're just tracking down the valley south out towards the town of Halson at the moment. We've got the aircraft now in the clean configuration. We'll keep the burners on, we're going to keep the afterburner in for the full entirety of the run. And track out towards the south, we just want to continue southbound until we hit the town of Lintau, and then we'll peel off to the right up into the mountains. You can actually see just off to our 1 o'clock there, the mountain pass that we're going to be taking out to the right. Already up through 600 knots, doing about 0.9 there on the Mach number. Cracking along really nicely, fuel burn up around £11,000 an hour, and we're down to about £4,000 in each tip tank currently. So peeling off to the right out towards the west, heading out over the town of Lintau, leaving that behind us. And we'll just roll the aircraft to go wings level. So tracking down the valley, usually there's a nice road, very decent landmark for spotting out the next portion of the run, but unfortunately, obviously that's pretty snow covered at the moment. You can just make out the outlines of the road there, just passing down below the aircraft. And again coming up over the hills, so pitching the aircraft up. There's the road again, just passing off the right of the aircraft. And again we'll roll inverted here just to loosen altitude, bring us back down towards the ground. And pointing the aircraft down towards the ground, we're now tracking out towards the west. Now tracking out towards the town of Altdorf. Pulling some G there just to reduce our descent rate as we come down the side of the hill. And again having to pull a little bit of G there just to make sure we clear the sides of the valley. So far we've pulled up to a maximum of around 8 G. That's really the easiest section of the run, it gets quite a bit tighter and more twisty as we go. Up to around 4G there in the turn. And the town of Altdorf just coming up off the nose, we should have the lake just out to the north of the town. Looks as though the lake's frozen over currently, no real surprise there. Again you can hear our pilot struggling a little bit there under the G. So just following the shores of the lake, we're going to be peeling off. Pretty hard turn to the right now, coming hard back on the stick. Again pulling quite a bit of G, up to around 6 Gs there. Up to around 1.5 units on the angle of attack indicator. We're going to have to keep a really good eye on that angle of attack indicator momentarily, so we've got a couple of really sharp turns that are actually right on the aircraft's limit with full afterburner in. Anyway, just continuing up into the hills once again. We're down to around £2,000 in each of the tip tanks now. And a little bit of time once again to catch our breath as we take a fairly easy section up into the mountains here. Everything opens up quite nicely, gives us quite a bit of room to manoeuvre. Next spot we're aiming for is that split in the two peaks of the mountains there. We want to be out to the right of that. So we'll keep the aircraft on its current heading momentarily. And we can roll in now towards the turn. You can see the split there in the side of the hills. We want to take the little cut in the mountain top there off to the right. Take about 550 knots, obviously bled off some speed here as we've climbed up into the mountains. This is probably the tightest section of the run. We're going to be pulling pretty hard left as we come over the tops of the hills. Again, we'll overbank the aircraft to lose some altitude. Coming pretty hard back on the stick here. We want to keep a really good eye on that angle of attack. Really, we don't want to be going above 3.5. We certainly don't want to be going above 5. And we made that turn pretty cleanly there. Reversing the turn pretty sharpish. We've got to come back around again to point ourselves in towards the lake without pulling too much on the angle of attack. We're up to around 4 units there, so we don't want to go any more than that. And over the lake now. Again, it looks to be fairly frozen over currently. And we'll come off the power as we come over the lake, bleed off some speed as we head back towards Molly. So nice short sharp run there, obviously pretty high speed. You can definitely drag things out a little bit more if you're not knocking on the door of Mach 1, but a really good fun little run and great fun in the TF-104 as well. Speed back down to around 350 knots now. We'll set the flaps to take off. And we'll come up on the power once again to maintain around 300 knots. The airfield just passing below us. It's very tricky to make out with the runway being covered in snow currently. Anyway, we'll head out towards the north. Nice big clearing the mountains here so we can get the aircraft turned around and headed back towards final approach. And we'll keep the speed nice and high until we've got the aircraft configured, otherwise it's pretty easy for the TF-104 to snap on you if you're low speed. So again, nice short sharp run, but really good fun, highly recommend it, and it's great fun in aircraft like the Hawk and the MB339 as well, where you've got a little bit more time on your hands and actually have to manage your energy a little bit more as well with the gain in altitude coming up through the hills. So just feeding in a little bit more throttle here, making sure we don't drop back below 300 knots. And the airfield off behind us at our 8 o'clock. We'll make a nice wide approach back towards the field, give ourselves plenty of time to get the aircraft configured and lined up with the runway. Below 260 knots we can take the gear down. So we'll bleed off some speed here in the turn. Come back on the throttle. And there's 250, gear can go down. And we're going to landing on the flaps. Quite a bit of drag in that configuration, so coming up on the throttle we'll maintain around 200 knots. And trimming the aircraft accordingly. We want to maintain above 80% on the RPM as well, just to keep that bleed air going over the wing. For those of you who aren't familiar with the F-104, the aircraft actually uses bleed air from the engine. It blows that over the leading edge of the wing, just to add some more energy there into the boundary layer. Pretty interesting piece of design. And again, pretty tricky to see the runway, but we are nicely lined up. So we'll continue inbound and make our landing. So just vacating the runway off to the left, we'll take the first left onto the main taxiway. You can see a little bit of the Molly scenery here as we make our way back in. Overall I have to say AGSim have done a very nice job with it, it looks great. We've got the heliport here just off on our right. We'll continue down the main taxiway though, back towards the hardened hangar buildings. And as we do so we can run the aft landing checks, so the flaps can go to the takeoff position. And we do have takeoff indicated. The pitot heat can come off. Rain removal is off. The radar is off. Speed brakes are in. You'll notice we've already got the canopy opened up there. That's as per the checklist, just so we can hear those lovely engine sounds as we taxi back in. And we'll leave the beacon on for the time being until we've got the aircraft shut down. Just passing the first of the hardened buildings, we'll make our way towards the second. You can see we've already got the ground crew there, ready and waiting with our ground equipment. And coming off the throttle onto the brakes, we'll get the aircraft nice and slow for the turn. As it's a pretty small manoeuvring area here, we'll just backtrack the apron. We'll actually bring the aircraft around 380 degrees. Back towards our ground equipment. Keeping a really good eye on our wingtip clearance as we do so. Obviously the F-104 doesn't have much to speak of in terms of wings, so that does make ground handling at least a little bit easier. So we'll take the turn really nice and slow, just to minimise our turn radius. And using a little bit of brake as well here, just to tighten up the turn. And we'll get ourselves nicely straightened up. And bring ourselves parallel and in line once again with our ground equipment.
There was a slight centering tendency, but nothing out of the ordinary. Now we'll call that car complete.
So the aircraft is stationary, we'll get the ground crew to insert the chocks once again. Running through the shutdown checks, the flaps can come up.
17087.
And we have up indicated, the INS can come off. All electrical equipment can go off, so we'll just do a quick scan of the cockpit. The UHF radio can go off. Anti-skid can go off. We'll get the G-suite pressure valve off, as well as the oxygen supply. IFF can go off. The cockpit temperature control can go back to manual. And again, we'll just leave the beacon until the engine shut down. The shutdown requires a 3-minute cooling period. We'll assume we've had that now, we don't want to be sitting here for too long. So lastly we can cut the throttle, or in this particular case we'll cut the engine fuel supply. So we do have a good run down there on the engine. The beacon light can come off. Same for the nav lights. The ground crew should move our ground equipment into position, and then we can get ourselves disembarked from the F-104.
So there you go guys, I do hope you enjoyed another outing in the SimSkunkWorks TF-104, and I hope you enjoyed as well another run through the Swiss Alps. Whilst here we were running a slightly older version of the F-104, I see that SimSkunkWorks recently updated the add-on. A few bugs had started to creep in with previous sim updates, so it's great to see that SSW is continuing to support their products. Anyway, that's about it for our flight today. Once again, I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do give it a like. If you want to see more content from the channel, then please consider subscribing as well. If you would like to help support the channel, you can do so by becoming a channel member or patron. And on that note, a huge thank you to my channel members and patrons for all of your support. I do hope that all of you are having a great day wherever you are. Take really good care, and I will see you all again soon.